Hi, I'm Sherry Gunter. I'm really excited about being in your home today and painting with you. The project that we're going to work on today is the Grandpa turtle. As you can see, he has lots of different parts to him, 5 in all. The first thing that I do before I paint is that I seal my wood, and then I sand it, and then I trace my pattern onto tracing paper, and I apply my pattern to my wood piece. You apply the pattern to the solid wood turtle, and then you take it over and transfer it to your individual wood pieces. Now, you don't need to transfer every little line. Just use your discretion. What you feel is necessary for you to trace, and you do so. If you can do things free-handed without any lines, it usually comes out better. Okay, at this time I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about cutting a three-dimensional wood piece. It's not really that difficult. He looks pretty complicated, but he's not really. You need to trace the pattern out, leaving his arm and his front leg and his hat off. Trace it out on a piece of wood, and then have your woodman cut him without these additional pieces. And then you trace him again. But this time you want to trace the shell, the arm, and the leg. You want to trace it out as a full one piece and have him go and cut that. When he's finished cutting that, then you want to separate the pieces. Cut them here and along here. And doing this way, you could cut them separate, but not always will they fit as well as if you cut it as one solid piece and then separate it. It's like a puzzle. It really needs to fit nice and tight. Okay, after you have all your pieces sealed and sanded and all assembled in front of you, then you want to start base coating. Now, I have taken these pieces and put them on one sheet of paper so that when I'm painting them, I don't have to be reaching all over, and it's easier for you to see what I've been doing. Okay, here it is, and this is how it looks when it's base coated. You don't have to worry about the shell because remember, it's a separate piece. And as you can see, the hat is too. And you've got your arm and your leg. You want to base coat it just like you would base coat a flat, solid piece. The only difference is you've got to remember that you need to overlap your color. The reason for this is when you lay your piece over top, when you get ready to assemble it and you lay it down, if you have not overlapped your color, then you might see some wood if your top piece is not cut exact. So when you base coat, you want to remember to just overlap your colors onto each other. Also, when I do any of the little parts, I will overlap, like the chest area, I will overlap that onto the shell tracing. And his neck, that'll be overlapped. And also his beard. Any place that has a three-dimensional area, you want to overlap your color a little bit. Run it on to the other part of the pattern. And it won't make any difference when you assemble it. You won't see where you've overlapped it. Okay, now before we start to paint, let me mention a couple of things that I use in my painting. You can use a paper towel if you like. I use a towel. I use a 1/2 inch flat synthetic acrylic brush. I use a short bristle liner. I use a stylus. I use a toothbrush. I use the eraser to remove any extra lead marks from my piece before I start painting. And of course I have a basin here with water. I like to use distilled water if it's available. This doesn't break down the pigments of your paint as much, and it really keeps your paint look real nice. And of course your paint. And I use extender a lot. At this time I would like to show you a little bit about extender. Some of you have probably worked with it and some of you haven't. Now, when I start to paint, let me move these things over. When I start to paint, I generally go to my basin, take a little water out, and put it on my palette. The reason for this is that if you need to thin your paint while you're painting, and you get into your paint and you go to your water basin to thin your paint, you're liable to get too much water on. Where if you have it on your palette, you can judge how much water you're getting. And this is really easier for me. Shake your extender because there's lots of solution at the bottom. Shake it real good. And put a little bit on your palette. Now you can always tell where the extender and where the water is. The water kind of goes where it wants to go, and the extender usually stays in a circle. If you have a problem with figuring out where the extender and where the water is, draw you a circle with a pencil and put your extender inside that circle, and that'll kind of help you out there. Okay, the reason why I work with extender instead of water, I work with water too, but the main reason I work with extender is it keeps your piece nice and soft through each step. I like to start out with a very light application of paint and gradually work my value up or down. And with extender, you're allowed to do this. Okay, let me show you. First, you want to wet your brush with water to get it nice and wet. Bring it out, dry it off if you like. And you want to get into your extender, just take some, and work it onto your paper or your wood piece. Now, if you're working on wood, you want to make sure you want to really work that extender into your wood. If you don't do this, it's going to just slip around on your wood. If you work it into your wood, when you start to paint, it adheres to it much better. So I work it in real good. And then let me get out some paint here. Okay. So I've got my extender into my wood, and now I don't dip back into the extender. My brush is moistened enough. I corner load that into my paint, and then I work it on my palette, moving it back and forth. You want to really work that brush real good so that you don't have any globs of paint left in your brush. And I start at the top of whatever I'm going to do, and I'm going to lay my brush almost on its side, and in little circular motions, never lifting my brush up from my piece, I'm going to start working down. And when I get to the bottom, I'm going to work up, releasing pressure as I go. When I get to the top, I'm going to come back down. When I get to the end, I want to come back up, gradually working. Now, if you feel that you've got some gaps in there, don't worry about it. Just leave it, because that's only the first application. Now look at this. Let me show you one more time. I'm going to go real slow so that you can see what I'm doing. Lay my extender down. It's hard for me to see it because it's on white. Dip into my paint, work my paint really well. I generally always keep my brush upright when I'm working the paint. Work it real well. I'm going to come over, and you're going to go lay it kind of on it, lay it down in your hand, sort of like that. And you're going to stay off the bristles. If you come up on your brush, you're going to have little lines like this, little brush lines. But if you lay it down sideways, you're only hitting this part of your brush, and it has a softer look to it. So what you're going to do is you're just going to start out very slowly, and it's sort of like little C's, but doing it quickly, you don't see them really. They just kind of all blend in together, working very softly. Never lift, don't lift your brush up and start back over here. When you get to the bottom, just come back up, gradually releasing pressure as you're coming down. Do this quickly if you can. If you've never worked with extender, the first thing you're probably going to do is use too much of it. The only thing I can say about that is that you just really need just to put a little bit on the corner of your brush and work it in and kind of experiment with how much you need. Sometimes I don't even apply it to the pattern. Sometimes I just put the corner of my brush in just like I would do if I was using water. Okay, I think that's all that I need to show you, but on that particular thing, let us go ahead and start base coating. Start shading. Okay, with three-dimensional areas, we don't have to really shade underneath like we would if we were doing a flat piece. For instance, I would not have to come in here and shade with a darker color value in here, because when I put on the shell, it will automatically do the shading for you. So you won't have to worry about that. In fact, it's so much easier to do a three-dimensional piece. You might not ever want to do a flat piece again. You just really won't. I feel like when I do a flat piece, it's really, I haven't finished with it because I don't have anything to put on top. Okay, now, really what I start with is generally I get the eye done because I do a lot of shading and I don't want to lose my eye while I'm doing the shading. I'm going to do that outline of my eye with black. Now, some people go ahead and dip into their water and thin it like this and bring it out. Now you can do that. It's fine, but most of the time I just go in there and I thin the whole pile down. That way I don't have to be worried about, and I just do that with the end of my brush and just wipe it off. I keep a towel on my lap to do this. Okay. Now, with the way I do line work is I generally start at my starting point, and as soon as I start, I look ahead of myself. When you look ahead of yourself, you see where you're going, and you don't have to stop in the middle of your stroke to see where you want to go. If you have to make any kind of stop in the middle of your stroke, you're going to relax and sit down a little bit on your brush. And when you do this, you're going to have a little thicker area wherever you stopped. So what I generally do is I go ahead, thin my paint like I showed you, roll your brush out of your paint, okay, just like that. And I put my hand down like this, or you can use your little finger, whatever's more comfortable to you. And I just kind of balance my hand, and you want to keep your brush straight up. When you lay it down, you're going to relax a little bit more, and there's going to be pressure on it. Try to stay on the tip of your brush. Starting at the starting point, you're going to start, look ahead of yourself, go all the way around, and start slowing down. When you come to the end, stop completely, and then lift off. If you go around and you start speeding up and you get to the end and you come off like that, you're going to have these little hairs coming off, these little openings, fuzzy ends. So if you stop beforehand completely, lift straight off, you'll do away with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and go on in and do his little lashes here. Just kind of make some little jiggity jags here. If you get off of his eye, it's no problem because we're going to fill in his pupil with black. Okay, now I'm going to go in just like that. Fill in this area with black. Now you can, if it's more comfortable to you, you can go ahead and do that eye all white. But on this particular eye, it's really easier to do it black. I have here some steps that you might want to look at. Now this one, I did it white. So you can do it white and then come in later and put your black in. Or you can do it, fill it in black, and then come in and put your white in. Whatever you are used to, that's fine. Okay. What you need to do now is you traced it like you saw me. Then you can fill it in with your green. I've already done that. Do it white or black. If you've done it white, then you want to put your pupil in with black. If you've done it black, then you want to put your white in. From this step, you want to put your lashes, and then you want to start doing your shading, your highlighting. I shade this top part with a darker green, and then I come in and I do some highlighting with a lighter green right on his lid. Then I come in with a burnt umber and float a little bit of burnt umber using water in my float onto the white, and that kind of gets that harsh white away. It makes it look more natural. Animals' eyes are never stark white. They always look a little brown. Their pupil always looks like the white of their eye always looks dirty. And then I put 2 colors of blue. I start off with desert turquoise, and then I come in with your lighter blue and put it lap it right over the darker blue. And then I come in after my blue is applied and put my lashes on, because these particular lashes go on top of the color, so you want to put them in after you've put your color in. And then, of course, the very last step is your little white glares or highlights in your eye. So you've got 6 steps to this particular eye. So what we're going to do right now, I'm going to forget this. I'm not going to do any more on that now, and I'm going to start shading my turtle. Okay, the very first thing you need to do is get out your darker green. Sometimes you put it out too early, your paint dries. You get in trouble. I'll put out my green. You don't need a whole lot. Re-moisten your brush. Dry it off either on a paper towel or another towel. And I generally start at the head and work down. And I turn. If this is a wood piece, I turn it just like I'm turning this. Now, I'm not going to moisten the entire area. I'm just going to kind of moisten the corner with extender. And you can kind of apply pressure to your brush. That pushes that extender into your paint and makes it flow real well. Now I'm going to start like this, and I'm going to float, following his beard. Now as you can see, I went over onto his beard. Flip it over on your clean side and clean that up. If you clean up your mistakes right away, you won't get in any trouble. If you wait a second for that to dry, then you're going to have to come back over with your gray and base coat it. You can't really see that, but it's on there. I'm going to do this on all the areas that I want to add a little shadow to. Okay, here I go again. Sometimes when I'm blending and working my paint on my palette, I will walk it away from the paint a little bit. Okay, I'm going to come up here. When I get ready to float or shade into a little area, I turn my brush onto its side and kind of sneak into that little corner. And then I straighten my brush up. And you notice I don't have it straight up. I have it tilted back a little bit, keeping the side of that brush on my wood piece rather than the bristles. And I'm going to go down and come out on the side. So I'm going to start on the side, come around, and come out on the side. And usually when you're working with these little critters like this and they have lots of little tiny areas, you can't help from going on to the other part. So just come in and clean it up, like I say. That keeps everything real nice and clean. I know and always when you use extender, you want to rinse your brush and come in and get rid of that secondary line that you have. You'll always have that line with extender. That's the only drawback from it. So you want to come in and clean that up, because when it dries, it will leave a line there, and it won't look good. Okay. Now, let's go up here, because we are going to have a hat on, and so naturally this hat will throw a shadow onto his top of his head. So we want to do some shading in that area. So I'm still working with my extender. I haven't worked with my water yet. Now, if you find it difficult to work with extender, then work with your water, because you can do almost the same thing with the water. I just think the extender is a little easier. Come in here and just float right in there. And you notice when I float, I kind of come back and pity-pat it, walk it downward. I'm kind of putting the foundation in, because I'm going to put additional colors on top of that. And I want to kind of get a background look, so that it's not just like a straight float. What I'm doing, let me show you here. If you float just a straight line, that's just real great. But if you do it like this and walk it out a little bit as you go, you have a much better look. And you already are starting to deepen and extend your color. So that's what I do, rather than just float along his head like that. I kind of float and then walk it down as I go, to kind of set up that area to do the next step. Okay. Now you want to go ahead and you want to put your shadowing in there. Sometimes a lot of people ask me, well, how do you know where to shade? What I generally do is I look at my piece and I decide where there would be a shadow. And anything that is in front, his shell is in front of his body and his front leg and his belly and his neck area. His hat is in front of his head, so you would shade here so that it would throw a shadow here, and you would shade along his shell line on his neck, it would throw a shadow there, along his belly. And you really don't have to worry about the shading in this leg, because remember, this one is going to come over on top of your back leg, so you don't see a real great deal of that. What I generally do is I generally put my pattern, my drawing, in front of me, and I refer back to that several times so that I know what piece really does need shadowing. Because when you're working with individual sections, you have to completely ignore the piece as a whole. You want to think of it as 5 separate pieces you're painting. But all of those pieces have to go together at the end. So where you put your shadowing is important for that particular step. Okay, now let's go ahead and do his little hand, because I usually want to work with all my greens first. I need to shadow his neck, and then we'll go ahead and do his little hand. Now remember, this is just the very first shadowing. So if you don't see a real drastic change, don't worry about it. Okay, walk that color up. Come in here, and you'd want to shade in here because his hand is set down. It sits down inside that little cuff. So you want to shade there. And I would bring that up along his thumb, because his thumb is down. So you would have a little shadow there. And generally, right in here, his little finger is going to be holding that fishing pole. The fishing pole is going to sit right in there. So there would be a little shadow there, okay? Now, let's go ahead and go to the shell, because there's some green things to do on the shell. We're going to put this aside right now and let it dry. When you use extender, you have a longer period of time that you have to wait through applications. With water, it dries pretty fast. With extender, you need to wait or go on to the next step before you come back, because it does take a little time to dry. Okay, I have got this in 2 stages. I have done over here 2 shadings. I haven't done anything but base coat this particular shell. This is how your shell will look base coated before you do anything to it. And what I want to do first, because you have to do this in stages, is you want to take some burnt umber. Burnt umber is a real good color to use. It keeps everything real soft and natural looking. Any brand will do. Now, I'm going to, instead of using, like I did on the shading and floating of the turtle's body, I just corner loaded my extender into the, corner load my extender in there and then dipped in the paint. But this time I want to go ahead and apply it to the wood. Working it in. Now you really need to work that in to the wood first. Burnt umber kind of grabs a little bit, and it doesn't have that soft look to it. So that's why I like to apply my extender first before I put burnt umber on. Work that burnt umber real well on your palette. Come back, walking it down just like I showed you. Don't stay on a single line. Kind of walk it in to the area. Dipping back into your extender. It doesn't last very long. Into your paint, excuse me. Then come around. You don't have to be real neat with this because the whole shell is going to be shaded with burnt umber. Okay? It's not a very fast process. Working with the extender is real slow, but when you finish, you have such a nice, pleasing piece. Okay? Okay, now you want, at this point, you can't come up and do this area here because you will run into the part that you've already done. So you want to leave that alone and come up here to the other parts of the shell. And just come on down here, do the same process around each spot. Don't worry, if you go on to the lighter green, it's no problem. Okay, just come in with the clean part of your brush and pick that up. Just pick it right up. Using extender, it doesn't dry instantly, so you can clean up after yourself a little better than if you were using water. Okay, I'm not going to go through every single circle here on his little shell. I've already done this over here. And as you can see, I've went around with burnt umber around each little spot. The next thing you need to do is come in with your darker green and you want to shade the spots. We're going to do a couple of those spots so you can see how they look. Now I've come over here and I've done this twice with burnt umber. You want to do things at least 2 or 3 times, depending on how dark you want to get it. That's your own, you make that decision yourself. I mean, if you don't want it real dark, then just put a couple of applications of the burnt umber. If you want it deeper, then you want to put another application. I need some more extender here. Always shake your extender. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to come in. Now here, you naturally cannot go all the way around because you will run in to the area and pick up what you've done. So what you're going to do is pick up your darker green, do half of your spot, working it down. Don't leave any ends, blunt ends. Fade them in to the light area. Keep it nice and soft, walking it down, releasing pressure. See how this little piece of paint got in there? Turn it over on your clean side. Flip that out. Just kind of, if I had worked my paint a little bit longer on my palette, that wouldn't have happened. You always want to work it real well on your palette. Just work that in there. Now, you want to do that around each spot. I've done it here. Okay, the next step on the shell is you want to come in at the top of your shell after you've shaded it with your darker green, and you do this about twice, as you can see. The first time it doesn't show up much. The second time it really comes to life. When that dries, it's even going to be lighter. Now you want to come in and add a little highlight, because these little spots need to stand out. You really want to think about the things that you want to stand out too, just like the things that you want to make deeper. You want to think of what you'd like to have be lighter also. I'm going to come in with a lighter yellow. This is lemon yellow. Put a little bit on my palette. Now, this is kind of a transparent paint, yellows are. And so I don't really have to add my extender to the area. So what I'm going to do is just kind of corner load it, dip it into my extender, work it on my palette. Now this has to be done a couple of times also. Come on and really mash, dipping back in. Don't put any more extender in your brush. Really mash in to that wood, making that color come out. Now you want to do that to every spot, turning it to where it's comfortable for you. Don't be in a rush to paint. If you're in a rush, then don't paint. Take your time. If it's not important enough to you to take your time with, then it's not important enough to do it. Don't worry about how many times you have to do something. Don't even worry about that. The finished product is what you're interested in. And you're sitting there to enjoy yourself and to relax. And so that's your time. That's your own special time of day. So you want to take your time and make it look really nice, and don't even think, oh my goodness, I have to do this 2 or 3 more times. If you have to think about that, then you shouldn't be painting. Okay? Maybe it's not a good day for you, so you just stop that day and go on to something else. Okay. Now, I did this one time. This needs to be done at least 2 more times with your lemon yellow. And now on your final highlight, I'm going to come over here on this shell that I've already highlighted, and I'm going to use pineapple, which is just a lighter value of yellow. I stay away from using white or off-white for any of my highlighting colors. It seems like it gives it such a harsh, drastic change. I want to keep with the same family of colors. What I mean to say is that if you start off with yellow, just lighten that yellow, or lighten it with white, or go to a lighter color. Never go from your yellow to your white. Just go to a lighter value of that particular color that you're working with. Okay, as you can see, that's about 2 values up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, rinse my brush, dip into my lighter value of yellow, corner load it with the extender, work it real good. Now with this yellow, if it's too much, if you have too much extender, just kind of wipe it off with your finger and blot at your hand on your towel. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to first just come in here, run right over top of your darker green. Don't worry about that. This is a highlight on his shell. Just come on down here. Now I ran out of paint. You need to go back in. Don't dip it back into extender. Just come on in here and mash it in. Now I went over here. Just come in and clean that up. When you're doing the burnt umber around the spots, and you're doing your dark green around your spots, try to stay off of the black. Clean it up right away. You want to see the separation. If it's totally impossible for you to do this, then come back later on and do your line work over again. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to come down and highlight these spots here. Okay, mashing in, walking it down. You see, I never just go straight like that. I walk it down, moving it, pity-patting it in little circular motions like I showed you before. Actually, I'm going just like this, but I speed it up and walk it down. Okay? Clean up that little edge. And you want to do this to each spot. Okay? And how it's going to look when it's finished is like this. Okay? I've completely did all the highlighting, all the shadowing, and my final step for the shell would be fly specking it with your toothbrush. I do that with a dry toothbrush. I dip it in, the green, mash it into my palette. Having it straight up, I just flip it with my thumb and just kind of spread that all over. If you don't like the fly specking effect, don't do it. This is your own taste, whatever you happen to like. Okay, we are all done with the shell. Reach in and dry off your toothbrush, lay it aside. And down here I've got myself another turtle all done with 2 shadings on everything. Otherwise I've shaded twice here on the green. I've come in and did some shading in here with red iron oxide. I've done some shading on his cuff with burnt umber. I've come in and done his shoe with slate gray. You don't have to do any shading on black, so what we're doing here is just highlighting. Come in and put his patch on. I've done it twice, shading here on his little hand and on his beak. And we're almost ready. I've come and done the line work on his hat. Let's go ahead and go on in and put the final touches to him. I'm going to take black green, which is the darkest green that's available to you. If you don't have black green, you can take your dark forest or whatever green that you have and add a little black to it. It's much easier if you just go have the colors so that you don't have to mix them. Okay, now what I'm going to do here is just go right over the shadowed areas that I have already done with the darker green. Now you don't want to apply too much pressure. Working it in, walking it out, keeping it sliding out on your brush. Now if you get it too dark, just kind of work with it for a few minutes to where it looks good to you. And you want to do this along his neck. Okay? And you want to flip him around like that and do it on this part of his neck. Okay? Coming in and cleaning up that secondary line that I was talking about. Okay? And when you clean up your area, your secondary line, don't just dab it there. Go ahead and just kind of sweep it out completely. That way you don't have any dry spots, nothing showing. Okay, now I've kind of put all the darkness I want in his head. And you want to come in and do the same thing to his hand. So what we've done here is we've shadowed twice with we've base coated, and then we've shadowed twice with your darker green, which I use dark jungle. I've done this twice, and then I've come in with my darker value, which is black green, and I put the final shading on it. I do all my shading first, and then I go to my highlighting. Okay, we want to do the little hand. I've got this piece, all the little three-dimensional pieces already finished for you, so we won't run through everything. It's black green. Now you don't want to use too much black green. It's a real strong color. You don't have to really, and you want to blend it real good. And you don't have to really use a lot of it. Come in here, walking it up to his thumb. Okay, come along his hand, walking it here. Right in here where his little thumbnail is, you want to kind of get some shading in there. Because remember, his fingernail is on top. Okay? Okay. We've already finished the shell. So all the green parts are done. Now we need some more shading. Like I've shaded with the burnt umber here, and I've went in with my blue. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. You want to use your darkest blue that you can find. In this case, I've used a navy blue. And it's not quite as dark as I want, so I probably will go ahead and get into my black and mix maybe just a tad of black with it. Just a tad. Mix that with your the end of your brush. Wipe it up, and then you want to come in. And with dark colors, you do want to put your extender down first, because they will go down real hard. What I mean by hard, they'll look real stiff, or they just grab, and I just hate that look. So you want to keep everything nice and soft. You don't want to ever see where your color stops and where it begins. You want it to all blend in together. Everything must fade into each other. Okay, you want to come down and reinforce this area here on his pants. Now his pants are underneath or down in this cuff, so that's where you want to really get your darkest value right in there. Okay, and you want to do that same procedure on his little hand, on the cuff of his little hand. Okay. Okay, let's go in. Now we just leave that alone for a few minutes, because I've already finished these pieces also. I've finished his pants. Okay. And I've also finished his little hand. Okay. But I'm going to show you what I do in here in just a few minutes. But let's go ahead and set these aside and finish the highlighting. Okay, now you've already put in your you put 2 coats of burnt sienna in here. And then your final and third coat is red iron oxide. I don't have red iron oxide today, so I'm going to take a little burnt sienna, maybe just a little bit more to make sure I have enough. And then you want to take a little Georgia clay, and then of course a little country red. If you don't have these colors, just take red and kind of a burnt orange and your burnt sienna color and mix these together. Now I think I might have to have a little bit more red, but maybe not. It looks pretty good. It looks nice. Okay. Mix that real good so that you get all the colors together. Okay. Now you're using that harsh color again, so you want to come in and lay your extender down into this area real nice like that. And you want to come work your brush, and you want to put your final application. Now don't press hard. Now there's that technique again, just kind of in circular motions, working it up and down and out. Okay? Now you want to do this on his beak and on around his shell. And at this time you've got all of your shading done here. So you want to try to finish his little eye. Now I want his little eye to stand out. I want his lid to puff out. And so I'm going to put a lighter color on his lid. I'm using olive green. Okay, now we really don't need any extender on that small area. So what we're going to do is just dip in to the extender and corner load our brush, work it real good, and come in here. And look, we're not going to put our whole brush down because this is a real small area. So I'm just going to work on the corner. I'm still using the same process, little teeny tiny circular movements, walking it up and back as I go. Okay, come in there and clean up any area. Now you need to do this at least a couple of times. Okay, and on his little hand you want to come in and highlight his thumb, keeping all your edges nice and crisp. Okay, turn it around. I'm going to come and do his hand, the top of his little hand here with the lighter green. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you what I do when I get done highlighting. I'm going to go back in one more time and I'm going to reinforce that shadow color. So what you're doing is you're highlighting twice And then you're going to come back and reinforce that shadowing. In other words, I would come in with my first shadow color, which was dark jungle, and I want to go right over and set that. I want that highlight to set right in down in there. I still want my highlight to come all the way around, but I don't want to see where it stops. So in order to eliminate that, you want to come in and reshadow just that little corner. Don't walk it up as much as you would if you were applying the shadow for the very first time. I know this is a lot of steps, but we're only concerned with what it looks like at the end. All right, I've finished this hat already, but let's go ahead and let me show you how nice it looks while we're letting this other part dry. How nice it looks when we add some shape to it. Now here again, just a little bit of extender on my corner. Now if you want to use water, you may use water. There's no problem in that. It just seems like the paint moves a little bit better without grabbing when you use the extender. Okay, I'm going to kind of put a little shape to this poor little hat. Okay, what you want to do is start out on the corner of your brush, having it down pretty much in your handle, and you want to walking your color up as you go. Come around and kind of set that little brim out and set the hat itself back down under. As you can see right now, it's already starting to look better. See? Just doing that one time. Now you want to do this step at least twice because you really want that to be set down in there real well. Let me show you the one that I've got finished already. See, we're going to come in and I'm going to show you the highlighting. You really want to make that nice and dark in there, walking your color up and out. Okay? That night gives you that nice depth there. Okay, it really makes that brim look like it's standing out. So we need to make it look like that. We need to do that at least 2 or 3 times. Let me see if it's dry enough for me to get one more time in there. Okay? Mashing down. Now, don't mash down the very first time you do it, because the first time you do it, if you mash down, you're going to, with burnt umber especially, you're going to get a line there. So the very first application you want to put on real soft. And then the second one you can put on a little harder. And then the third and final one you can bear down pretty good on it. Okay. Sometimes you have to go back and get back into your extender and in your paint because burnt umber is kind of transparent. Okay, now right in this area I want to come in here and I really want to walk that color up because that's the highest part of the hat. And I just want to kind of watch those corners. You want this to round off real nice, and you want this to cup around real nice. And you want to do that at least 2 times. And while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to go in and finish, put the highlight on his beak, and finish his eye real quick. And then I'm going to assemble him for you and show you how nice he looks. Okay. Now, I need to come back in and put that highlight one more time in there. And let's go ahead and put out, well, we have some right here. If your paint dries, just break it open with the end of your brush. Dip in to your lighter green, and you want to dip into this. So you have 2 paints on that same corner. Blend them together. Now, if this makes a problem for you, take a little bit of your green and a little bit of yellow and make a lighter value with it. But it's really easy to do it just like this because you don't need a great deal of it, so you don't really have to mix a whole pile of it. Okay, now I'm going to come in here and I want to go ahead and fix that little lid. Now you don't want this to be straight. You want it to kind of ziggity-zag here because you don't want his lid going across straight, okay? And we're going to let that dry and come in and put his color in. Now, I'm going to have to look myself. That's okay. Okay, let's go ahead and lay down your first color, which is your light blue. You don't want to use extender at this point. Let's just go ahead and just have enough dampness to our brush to where it'll work the paint. If it's real dry, it shouldn't be, because you've been working with it, so there should be some moisture in there. Okay, you want to come in here and lay that first color down, okay? Now it won't be real noticeable, so you want to do that a couple of times. And you want to put your line work, while you're waiting for this to dry, put your line work in. You want to come in here with your darker gray. I'm going to put some slate gray down and add some black to that real quick. Okay, mix it up like that. I don't have available the darker gray, so I'm going to go ahead and use that today. Just mix it up, dip into your extender, and just going to make some little lines here. You don't have to really, this sort of represents hair coming down. And just let it go like that, okay? Come in here quickly and put his highlight on his little beak. Okay, like this. Just like that. And you want to highlight this area here and around his shell. Now, walking it down, mashing it, walking it at the same time. I'm going so fast you probably can't see, but I'm still on the side of my brush. I'm not up like that. Okay? Okay. Now, let's go ahead and real quick put in one more coat of that blue. Now, you can use other colors. You don't have to use blue. You can make him have a green eye, or you can make him have a brown eye, okay? Now, while we're waiting for that, we need to put his cheek in. Now, with his cheek, I use Adobe because it has a nice brown look to it. You want to lay your extender. I don't want to have just a floated cheek. I want to kind of have a cheek that kind of blends into his body. You don't really see it, but yet you do. It's there. Work your, I've already applied my extender, okay? Now you want to kind of work that in, working down like we've always done before. Okay? And you've got his little cheek in there. Now, generally I kind of get rid of that little line, just kind of flip it on your clean side, because that's the side that your extender's in. And just kind of take away that line so that you don't really see it. Okay, you just want to see a transparent pinkness to his little cheek. Okay, let's go ahead with our last color of blue, and we'll put his highlight in, and then I'll assemble him for you and let you see how he would look if he was, when he's finished. Okay, I use a darker color, which is desert turquoise, darker blue, and I overlap, let me turn this around, I overlap that blue right over top. Now I still let a little bit of the lighter blue show up. Okay, now to put his nostril in real quickly, let's go ahead and do this real quickly. You're just going to dip into your red iron oxide or burnt sienna, whatever's handy, as long as it's in that same family. And you're going to take your liner brush and you're going to just put him in a little nostril. Okay, just like that. And then you're going to come in and sort of put a little light wash of color. Wash, I mean just kind of thin down your paint of the yellow in there. Okay, on his nostril like that. Okay, now let's put his highlight in his eyes. I use white at this time for that. Now this is your own preference. Just kind of put your little pollywogs in there. Put a couple little slashes up here and put your little dot there. Okay, let's go ahead and put him together and see how he would look if he was all finished. We're going to come, now remember this is your bottom piece, and you're going to hot glue this area. Put some hot glue there or tacky glue. And you're going to glue his little shell down, okay, like that. And then you're going to come in and put his little leg in this area right here, okay? And then you're going to come in and put his little arm, which fits real nice up in there. And last, his little hat. Whoops, let me get it on there, okay? Okay, now that's how he would look when he's assembled. And you want to put his little fishing pole in there, and you just have to really put a wash on that fishing pole and some little indentions lines around it with burnt umber, and that's all you have to do with that, okay? And then stick his little pipe. His pipe is done the same way as his hat, and that is just about all you have to do with him. And a little boy, you do about the same way. Okay, I want to thank you so much for letting me come into your home today, and I hope you have as much enjoyment out of painting these little critters as I do, and I hope they bring you some happiness. Thank you very much.